Hello, and welcome to our second session on pitching. When we stopped at the end of session number one, we had identified that pitching itself is a transaction between two parties where the party that is pitching is trying to influence the party that is being pitched to give them something. And as part of our pitching process, we identified that there were four distinct pieces that dealt with the intro, that dealt with the backstory or the plot, that dealt with the conclusion, and that dealt with the ask. And that the large part of our pitch was a focus on an individual that we named the hero, who is basically our customer, and this customer is in need of something, and the pitch is basically our attempt at explaining to either an individual or an audience how we help the hero get to where he wants to be. We also spoke about the fact that the basic ground rule is to keep it simple and to the point, and to ensure that we respect the intelligence or the intellect of the party, the audience that is being pitched. So this is a brief summary of lesson number one. Now in lesson number two, we are going to look at two or three very important areas. The first area is, because a large part of the pitch is the hero, is the customer, we will talk about a concept called customer personas, or also known as customer profiles, and we'll talk about why these are important and how do these get built. We will also talk about, if we have time, about once you've got the customer persona and the profile sorted out, how do you link the pain that drives the entire backstory with your product features. We'll talk about how, as part of the pitch, we share our sales call with the customer. So what's the script for a sales call with a customer? And then finally, we will talk about something that is again very misunderstood and misused, and that is the business model. And doing these four pieces, the customer persona and the profile, the pain and the features, the pitch and the sales calls, and the business model, are all part of the last step that we discussed in our pitching exercise, which was making it real. If you could answer question number one, which is who is your customer, what does he look like? If you would answer question number two, what is the pain of this customer, and how do your product features address this pain? Question number three, I am your customer, sell it to me, pitch it to me. And question number four, can you actually make money from this entire exercise on a continuing, ongoing, sustainable basis? If you would answer these four questions in front of most audiences, you can make it real. Now there are other elements that come into the pitch, but these elements will be covered in lesson number 3 or 4. Today the idea is to first cover customer personas, cover the linkage between customer pain and product features, translate this linkage or this grid which links pains and features to a sales call or a script for a sales call in front of a customer, and finally, if we have time, do a quick intro to business model, and then maybe do a detailed session on how business models are presented and included in your pitch on a later date. Again, the objective is to get us to a more tangible, making it real step. So let's start with customer personas. Let's start with step number one. Step number one is building the profile of a customer. Why is the customer an important part of the backstory? Why is there such a big focus? While there are many ways of answering this question, I think you need to take a step back into the reasons why new ventures, new businesses, new products fail. And the biggest reasons why they fail is why the engineering team or the product development team or the marketing team does a great job in building a super product. A number of times, customers do not see the super product as a super product and refuse to buy it. So all the hard work, all the dollars spent here come to a big fat zero if the customer refuses to buy it. Right? So now the reason why the customer refuses to buy it is because, one, we don't know who the customer is, so we don't know, who is the customer, right? We don't know why this customer is interested in buying this product. So what is the motivation for buying? We don't know what are the buttons that we need to press for this customer for him to go out and buy it, or what would drive him to buy it. And most importantly, we don't know what to say to this individual, or even where to find him, right? So in recent years, especially over the last 15 years, when people have realized that simply building a product is not enough, it is extremely important for you to realize who your final customer is, where will you find him, what is it that this customer is thinking when he starts looking for a product like yours, and what do you say to him when you find him. This entire thing, this entire framework falls into something that a gentleman by the name of Steve Blank developed. And Mr. Blank's framework is also known as the customer development framework, right? So from both a new business point of view, if you're a startup, if you can take some time out to understand what do these guys want and need, and why would they want to need it, and why would they buy it, you can save yourself a lot of pain by building product features that are not necessary. By not building product features that are not necessary, you can also understand the sales transaction, and you can also understand how to best script it so that every time you pitch it to a customer, the probability of him or her buying the product from you gets higher and higher, right? That's the primary motivator why we say our customer is so important. Now, from an investor point of view, from an audience point of view, in terms of, if you're a startup, in terms of audiences, there are 3 or 4 types of audiences that you're likely to see. First are people who are actually your customers. So when you go in front of the customer and the customer sees that you actually understand what they've gone through, you understand their pain, you'd be amazed at how many times clients have come up to me and said, I've always known that I needed this, but I could never ever what's the right word? I could never ever present it or explain it the way you've done. And now that you've done it, I know exactly how to sell it to my superior and to my board. So if you understand, if you've done a good job on the customer side, customers are generally very, very receptive to people who understand their pain and are more than happy to work with them. If you're not, if the customer perceives that you haven't done your homework or you don't understand, they're not going to waste their time. So understanding the customer and his pain and his profile works both ways. If you've done a good enough job, the sales process becomes all the more easier. It becomes collaborative, it becomes participative, where both you and the customer together are trying to sell it to their organization. And if you haven't done your work, if you haven't done your homework, if you haven't understood this aspect of selling and pitching, then you'll have an issue. So that's one part of the audience. And then another part of the audience are your investors. And the way investors look at this is they have a very simple question. Their simple question is, will the dog eat the dog food? Has the customer actually been approached? Has he tried it? How does he react to the product? Does he like it? Does he hate it? Does he love it? Does he want it? How much will he pay for it? These are all questions that you can't answer unless and until you've actually gone out and done this homework here, and actually gone out and spoken to people here. And if you've done that, then your presentation, your pitch to an investor becomes a lot more credible, because the investor saying, this is a great idea, you're a great team, this is a great pitch, this is a great presentation, everything is fine, but will the customer buy the product? And we then come out and say that, well, the customer has A, B, C, D, E, F, G issues. These issues quantified in monetary terms are worth X, Y, Z millions of dollars, and my product comes and addresses these issues and these problems and these elements, at a fraction of what it currently costs them. And I have spoken to a handful of customers, and they're actually quite keen, and one of them has actually come out and bought it. So we actually have a live site where this thing is working. The third audience that you're likely to see every now and then are individuals who can help. They're not customers, but they know customers, right? So these are people who can connect you to customers. They're not investors, but they can connect you to investors. Or they're neither customers or investors. They know neither customers or investors, but they have the power to give you coverage, to give you exposure, to give you credibility. And these individuals generally are the judges in the so these individuals are so these individuals are the judges in your business plan competition or your regional technology competition. Now these judges also have the same thing. They say, do you understand the customer? Will the customer buy the product? One, will the dog eat the dog food? And in addition to this, they also have this huge question about how big is the market and what is the size of this opportunity. And again, if you've done your job, if you've done the groundwork to convince both customers and investors to work with you, then that means you actually have the information needed and required to answer this question. If you don't have this information, if you don't have the ability to answer these questions, then you actually have an issue. So from all three aspects, from customers, from investors, from judges at business plan competition, all three of them really focus on your ability to define, your ability to describe, your ability to document how this market is laid out and what really drives the customer to buy this product. In the end, it comes down to the fact that if pitching is a transaction, if buying and selling a product is a transaction, then how well do you understand this transaction? And you can only understand this transaction if you understand the product on your side and you understand the customer's mindset on the customer side. If you can combine these two elements together, then you've done a reasonable job of making your case. So now that we've covered why understanding customer is important, let's talk about what are the different mechanisms for identifying who the customer is. Okay. If you go to Marketing 101, there is something called target segmentation. Segmentation. So what is target segmentation and what is market segmentation? Target market segmentation basically goes out and says that this is the entire market. So if I sell risk systems, I can sell risk systems to banks. And within banks, I can sell risk systems to large banks and big banks, or I can sell it to small banks. I can sell it to mutual funds. I can sell it to insurance companies. I can sell it to brokerage houses. I can sell it to hedge funds. I can sell it to high net worth individuals. I can sell it to regulators. And I can sell it to individual customers. And I can sell it to partners or facilitators or vendors of all of the above, right? So this is the entire market. So let's define this as the overall market. Now, if your pitch starts by saying that I am going to sell it to all of these guys and I'm going to do it at once, your pitch immediately loses credibility, stops being real. The reason why it stops being real is if you look at, let's say, the North American market, there may be about 6 to 8,000 banks here. There may be 6 to 8,000 mutual funds, 6 to 8,000 insurance companies, 6 to 8,000 hedge funds, certainly over a million high net worth individuals, about maybe 100 odd regulators, and millions of vendors that work with all of these parties. So you can't target all of these, right? Now, if you say I'm going to deal with banks, again in this space, there are 6 to 8,000 banks, so you can't deal with all of the banks. You need to be a little bit more specific. I'm only going to deal with large banks, or I'm going to deal with small banks, and this becomes a little bit more specific. So if you take out the small bank piece, if you take this piece out here and bring it here, say I'm going to deal with small banks. You focused on a specific target segment, but you still don't have enough information. So the first question I ask is, there are lots of small banks. There are banks that are only worth 10 to 50 million dollars in assets. There are banks worth 100 million dollars in assets. There are bank worth 500 million. There are bank worth $1 billion in assets. So which one of these segments are you going to go after? So let's say I say these guys are too small. I may not be interested. May not have the space. It's the 100 million ones. And let's say I say there are about 1,000 banks in total that are in this bucket. So how do I work with them? Now the second piece is, once you've identified 1,100 million dollar banks, you've again gotten a little bit more specific, but not specific enough. My next question is, why do these banks need your risk platform? Why do these banks need your risk platform? Why would they want to buy it from you? And here I may have a long list of questions. There is more regulation. Certainly, it takes about 2 to 4 people to run a proper risk group, irrespective of who you are and what you do. That's just the data part of it. These 2 to 4 people are not 10 to $25,000 a year resources. These are expensive resources. So your budget, just your payroll, your salary budget for these individuals is actually quite substantial. And let's say if you average $80,000 a year, you're looking at about somewhere between $300,000 to $500,000 a year in costs. Right? Fourth, banking regulation is not static, it's not constant, it changes every year. So even if these guys were able to create a team that did this, their systems would need constant updatation. So that's another challenge. Okay. Fifth, banking regulation is boring. It's difficult to read, difficult to understand, difficult to digest. So you need an expert opinion in any case. Even if you had this group of 300 to 500 people, you would still need a consultant to help you out every now and then before your system gets set up and running, till your team gets comfortable and is reasonably hands-on. Right? So these are all factors that would drive decisions for these banks to buy this product. So this describes part of the pain, but this pain right now is still very impersonal. It's very institutional. For the pitch to make sense, then need to ask that. Remember, what's the sequence? Financial institution is the entire market. Within that, there are banks. Within these banks, there are small banks. Within the small banks, there are banks that are between 100 to, let's say, $250 million in assets. And these small banks have a requirement to do risk. And within this risk, they have a need to do about a team of about 3 to 5 people and spend about $300 to $500,000 a year in their budget. And they have a list of reasons for 1, 2, 3, 4, the ones that we've covered before, to buy this platform or to at least get this service. So the next question that comes up is that within the small bank, who is the end user? The end user at this bank is this group, right? These people who actually do all the work. And the second question is, who is the sponsor? Sponsor. So the end user is the person who does the work. The sponsor is a person who pays for the work. So now what you're looking for, you're saying within your definition of the customer, who's the end user, please define him, and who's the sponsor. Now this end user and sponsor both are not institutions. They are individuals, which mean that if they're individuals, then they have a profile. And in terms of their profile, there is age, there is demographics, there is education, there is experience, there is personality profile and type, and within this there are likes and dislikes. There are hobbies and things they do to de-stress. There are ambitions and dreams. So these are all aspects of the profile of these individuals, and it's these aspects and many more after this that actually drive what we call buyer behavior. Depending on whether you come from the English or the US school, that's how you'd spell behavior, right? So the objective of building the profile, the objective of becoming one with the customer is to get this right, because once you get this right, then you get your script right. So for example, what is the deepest, darkest fear of this group, both the end user and the sponsors? And again, depending on who they are and what their profile is, this deepest, darkest fear could take many forms. If you're an end user, you want the work to be accurate and efficient and useful. You want it to be done in a time so that you can actually go home tonight, right? If you're a sponsor, you don't want it to be wrong under any conditions. You don't want it to embarrass you or disappoint you or make you look bad in front of the board or your regulator or your senior executive team. And you want it to be reliable and robust. And you really don't care whether you have to pay another $250,000. If you're spending $500,000, you're more than happy to spend another $250,000 as long as you are right. But you're not going to be happy or too happy with spending $750,000 and being wrong, right? So that's the end. So that's the sponsor. That's the end user. Now we can very clearly see that there is now a drift or change in motivations. When we were here, this was the bank, and then we had a list of reasons for the bank. And if you go to the list of reasons for the bank, you can see the reason why a bank wanted to do this was because more regulation, because it was expensive, because banking systems were not static, because it was boring, because you need an expert, because people tended to make mistakes. And these mistakes then get penalized by your regulators, and these penalties then affect your career prospects. Right? So this is what happens at the banking level. And then when you move down to the individual, once we had the profile, we now have a slightly different list of motivators. So you've now created a path where you started with, once again, FI, bank, small bank, $100 million or so, looking for a risk system. And then within this, you said, you have a sponsor who has his own sets of motivation, and you have an end user who has his own sets of motivation, and you need to make a pitch for the sponsor which is high level, which pushes his buttons, and you need to make a pitch for your end users which is detailed, which is action oriented, and that pushes his buttons. Right, so far what we've done is we quickly walk through the elements or the drivers of a customer profile. However, so far everything that we've done to date focuses on motivations. We haven't really gone out and described the individual per se, as in we've gone out and defined the attributes that tell us who this guy is: age, his demographics, his education, his experience, his personality profile, his likes, dislikes, his hobbies, his desires, his ambition, and his dreams. We've gone out and defined the attributes, but we haven't actually gone out and built a profile. And while we've spoken about the fact that you may have an end user and you may have a sponsor, we haven't even gone out and said what roles do these guys play in the organization and what's at stake here for them, if they're right or wrong, what's driving their decision to pick a product or not pick a product. So let's dig a little bit more on the side. So let's say if you are a end user and if you're a sponsor, what's the difference between these two? Sponsor, again, with respect to the risk system, could be the CFO, could be the CRO, could be the secretary or a member of your board risk committee, which could be either this role or this role. In most cases it's a combination of the CRO and the CFO. The CFO, because a lot of the reporting that goes out through the CFO's desk. The CRO, because a lot of the reporting that goes out is actually produced and generated by the CRO's desk. And then there is the risk taker. Now the risk taker on occasions is the chief investment officer or the treasurer or the portfolio manager. This guy basically wants protection. He says, I'm in the risk space, I'm the risk business, I'm the risk market. There are instances where I'm going to make mistakes. I want to make sure that there is somebody watching my back, whether it's the CRO or the CFO. And these guys have their own day jobs, so they can't do this on a day-to-day basis unless and until they have the right system. So in terms of your primary sponsors, you've got CFO, CRO, and the CIO or the treasurer as your primary sponsors for a risk system. In terms of end users, this is your risk team. A risk team is basically your quants. And what's their motivation? Their motivation is the ability to price transaction, the ability to price structures, the ability to play, to generate numbers, to do analysis. So analyze is possibly easier to analyze, and do this versus what they hate the diligence with which data needs to be captured. They hate the routine or the boredom that comes up with cleaning or maintaining a clean data set. So ideally they want a system to take care of the boring piece and have enough depth and richness for them to do the interesting models piece, right? Because it's these models, it's this ability to play with numbers, to generate models, to price structure, to price transaction, know whether you're right or wrong, to go against the market. It's this that sort of keeps these guys happy. But what keeps these guys happy? What keeps these guys happy is the fact that they know that they're in safe hands, and the numbers that they have in front of them are accurate. That there is no risk, no chance, no fault, no reason for any of this to be wrong. That's the end result, right? So you've now looked at, again, motivations, slightly more detailed look at the motivation of both the end users and the sponsors for a risk system, CFO, CRO, BRD, and the risk team. Let's add another dimension to this. So if you look at a typical CFO, typical CRO, typical CIO, what's the profile? So this gentleman here could be an accountant, could be an MBA, certainly somebody with somewhere between 15 to 20 years of experience under his or her belt, somebody who is very comfortable with numbers, with regulation, and with compliance, right? Look at the CRO. In most cases, this gentleman is possibly an MBA, somebody who has sat at least once in his life at some point in time on the trading desk. Again, is somebody that has 15 to 20 years of experience, is very comfortable dealing with the board as well as the executive committee, and is very comfortable with the concept of risk, understands what he wants in terms of reporting and processes, and can hold his own. Okay, the chief investment officer, this gentleman is a trader. He's short on time, has opinions that are directly linked to his view of where the market is and is going, and understands the fact that things change quickly and rapidly and want your system to move just as rapidly with it, right? So in terms of the profile that we just looked at, here's an instance. It's not a complete profile. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done, but we have more detail for both the CFO, the CRO, and the CIO. So when I talk about the fact that I want you to build a customer profile, this is exactly what we need. Look at the number of layers we've added. When we first started this session, we were here. When you say, okay, I want to build a customer profile, then we went a little deeper and we said, before we do a customer profile, we need to understand why it's important. And when we spoke about why it's important, we actually said, in terms of presentation, there are 3 possible types of audiences that you're likely to see: customers, investors, and business plan and regional plan competitions. And the idea that all 3 of them are looking for is that selling and pitching or making a product work is a transaction between the person who's built the product and the person who's buying the product. And a lot of reasons, a lot of time when businesses fail, when they don't do well, is because you may build a super product and spend a lot of dollars on it, but if a customer doesn't buy it, it's worth 0. So it's very important for you to understand who is buying your product and what their buttons are and what are you going to say to them and what drives their buyer behavior and where you're going to find them before you actually go out and build the product, which is the reason why you want to build customer personas. Then from here, we moved on to what we call a target segment or segmentation, and we spoke about the fact that markets generally are very large. If you try and capture all of them, you lose credibility. Your plan is no longer real. It goes back to being a movie. For you to go out and build a business, it's important that you actually pick a given market, and we picked up the 100 million banks, and understand what drives the reason at least a high level for buying your product. And then from there we made it more specific. So from banks we came to small banks, 150, to risk. We spoke about who are the primary end users and the sponsors. And when we came to the end user and the sponsors, we stopped focusing on the institution, started focusing on individuals and people and their profile. And then we went out and defined their profile, both in terms of age, demographics, education and experience, their personalities, their likes, their dislikes, their hobbies, their desires, their ambitions and dreams. And again, these are important because they sort of give you an idea of where to find them, where to pitch to them, and what to say to them when you actually sit down in front of a desk with them. Then we spoke about the fact that what really drives buyer behavior on part of the end user and the sponsor. What's the motivation? What is it that they're looking for? Then we spoke a bit about creating a pitch, a separate pitch based on the motivation of the sponsor and the end user. And then we actually came in and filled in who these guys are, what their background is, again at a very high level. And then finally we came down to our last piece where we put in more details. So we now we at a stage where we just short, if we add a few more pieces, if we add about what type of cars these guys drives, what type of suits these guys wear, what type of books and movies they go to, and the clubs they attend, and the vacations they take, you can very easily quickly get to a point where you can build a picture. If you close your eyes for a second, close your eyes, no peeking. So if you close your eyes for a second and take everything that we've just spoken about and try and build a mental picture, visualize, who do they look like? So if you look at the CFO, who does it look like? Does he look like Does he look like The Rock? Does he look like James Bond? Does he look like Martin Sheen or Charlie Sheen? Does he look like Michael Douglas? Does he look like Emilio Estevez? Who does he look like? What does he wear? What car does he drive? Where does he go? Where does he spend time? Is he happy? Is he sad? Is he upset? Is he stressed? Does he have had? Does he... So all of these are things that you can use to paint your own Mona Lisa of your customer. And once you've painted the Mona Lisa of the customer, then it becomes a very easy and simple job. It takes a lot of effort. It's not, maybe I'm simplifying it too much. It takes a lot of effort to get to this stage. But once you get to this stage, it's very simple to simply put a picture in front of your audience and say, this gentleman is my customer. Meet him. The reason why he wants to buy my product is because of A, B, C, D, E, F. I'm going to find him at this location at this time, which is the best time to pitch to him. And when I find him, when I sit down with him, I'm going to say to him that you need to buy my system because of A, B, C, D, E. I'm not going to actually go out and say that you need to buy my system. I'm simply going to ask him, how do you do this now? Are there any issues and challenges that you're facing? Are there any problems that keep you awake at night? And because I know the conversation, because I know the background, because I've done my research, I have a fair idea of what the range of answers will be. And when I get the right answer, I'll use that hook to simply go out and say, that's interesting, we've just recently done something similar for a competitor, for a client, for somebody similar in this space that you've recently met. And I think, if we sit down together, we may be able to find an interesting way of fixing your issue, your problem, your challenge, of making your life simpler, of making sure that you actually get back home on time so that you can spend time doing what you really like doing. Right? You can't do this unless until you actually have a picture. You can't do this unless until you actually have a profile that you can work with. And what we're really trying to do by going through this process is investing enough time in understanding the customer so that when we build this super product and put it in front of Mr. X, who is our customer, Mr. X is simply raving and jumping with joy and is more than happy to pay many more dollars compared to what we spent so that he can buy this product. That's the idea. You can't do this without putting the hard work that we've done so far. Right? So as I said earlier when we started the session, there are a number of topics that we need to cover. What we've just done is giving you a brief, to the point review of a customer persona and customer profile. Step 2 after this is to take a look at how to link customer pains with product features, and then how to go out and build a pitch and a sales script, and then how to go out and present and link all of this together in a business model to the 3 audiences we spoke about: your customers, your investors, and people who are neither but can certainly help you out by providing you coverage and exposure. I hope you found this interesting and useful, and had fun doing what we've just done. Look forward to seeing you in our next session. For the time being, thank you very much for your time. This is Jawad Ahmed Fareed signing off for Learning Corporate Finance. Thank you.